Hi, everyone. We will get started in just a few moments. Thank you so much for being here. We'll get started soon. Hi, everyone coming in. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. Let me know if you can hear me by saying hi in the chat room. Hello, everyone. We'll be started in just a minute. Please let me know if you can hear me by saying hi in the chat room. You can access the chat room by, oh, well, it's working. Questions are working, so good. It works. I'm going to delete those. But thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, let's get started. Thank you so much for coming to Get Yourself Hired webinars and workshops to make yourself irresistible. I am Whitney Hess, and I have this next hour to share a lot of work that I've been doing with you, and I can't wait to dig in. I just want to give you a little bit of an overview to what we're doing here in Google Hangouts. In case you've never used Hangouts before, this is being broadcast live. It is 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm currently located in Miami, Florida, and as people continue to come in, you will see that there is a question area to the right of the screen, the right of my video. We're already seeing that people are typing in there, and those are for questions, not for chat. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the things that are not actually questions, because I want to make sure that people who do pose their questions, I will definitely get to those. If you just want to make commentary on what you're hearing today, you can scroll over to the left-hand side of your screen and you can toggle to the chat, and you should be able to make comments there, and I will check those as well during our hour together. So this is being recorded. It will be available on my YouTube channel almost as soon as our time together is complete. So if you need to step out for a minute, or if you have a friend or a colleague who you think could benefit from this as well, that will be available to them, and I will be sending out the link via email afterwards, so so you know that you can have access to it. I'm so grateful that everyone is here today again. I continue to see the number of viewers increasing, and it's making me a little nervous. I just want to make sure everything's working correctly. You never know with Google Hangouts, but let's jump in. So I have a lot of information that I want to share today, and I just want to start off by making sure that it is completely easy for you to see my screen and my slides, and they are now live. So let's make sure that's working as well. What I am here to share with you today is a portion of what I have been delivering in my career coaching program, Plot Your Course. The Get Yourself Hired materials that we're going to be going over today come directly from exercise 9, which I call Show Your Strengths. And these are essentially all of the marketing materials that we use to attract our target audiences to us so that we can get ourselves hired, whether it's for a full-time position, freelance work, or whether you run your own business. I believe these same principles can be used across those use cases. So again, this will be taken directly from Plot Your Course. And so you're getting a sneak peek for free of what my participants go through towards the end of the 10-week program. So to begin, I want you to ask yourself this question. Are you optimizing to get yourself hired? Now, I know many of us are in this position where we have been attempting to get ourselves hired for some time. It can be the cause of much frustration and disappointment when the positions that we're really interested in seemingly can't, are not coming to us. We seemingly can't seem to make them happen. But the question that I want you to consider is, are you optimizing with the way that you are presenting yourself online for yourself to be the best fit possible? And we're going to go into all of the ways to ensure that you're doing that. Now, for those of you who submitted your full name and URL on the event page prior to today's event, prior to about 2 p.m. Eastern time, you will be getting a little prize towards the end of this hour. I have gone and done some secret shopping, as they call it, on your website and checked out your web presence to see how well you are optimizing to get yourself hired. And I have a series of criteria that I use to help my clients determine how well they're presenting themselves and how marketable they're really being. And I will be sharing the results of that secret shopping at the end of the hour. So what I want to cover today is what I consider to be this get yourself hired mentality. Now, in order to make ourselves irresistible for the people who we want to be working with, we really need to be thinking strategically. We need to consider who we want to attract, how we can be of value to them, and what will best show our strengths. Now, this who, how, what is in a very intentional order. Until we can identify with focus and clarity the types of companies we need to be working with in order to do our best work, we cannot optimize our materials to attract them to us. So just like in designing a website or an app, when you design for everyone, you end up designing for no one. And so we want to ensure that when we are designing our online presence, we are optimizing that design for our target audiences. And I will get into that in greater detail. In better understanding those target audiences' needs, we're then better able to position ourselves so that we can properly and clearly express the value that we bring to those prospective employers and partners. And lastly, it is a matter of demonstrating what our strengths truly are, showing our assets through the design of these materials that really makes us irresistible and helps prospective employers to feel like we would be a great fit and value to them. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, there are several different materials that you want to consider as part of your personal marketing plan. Now, we often don't think of ourselves as having personal marketing plans, but in actuality, we are essentially service providers when we are being hired, either for a full-time job, for a freelance gig, or when we are promoting our own business. And we need to consider how to market ourselves strategically using these materials, our resume, our portfolio, and our overall web presence. Now, I use these terms because they are readily recognizable. But as you will see, I have a very different vision for what a resume can be, what a portfolio needs to be, and how we can use our web presence to ensure that we are attracting the right people to us. I'm not talking traditional here, but it is helpful to use these terms so that we all have a sense of basically what we're talking about here. Your resume is best used when it is demonstrating the timeline of your evolution. Everyone starts at the beginning, and it is no exception when you are displaying your experience to a prospective employer that you are going to have had a progression in your career. It is really beneficial when you can demonstrate to your prospective employer what that evolution has looked like, and your resume is the place that you can most effectively do that. The portfolio, which we will also be discussing in depth, is where you are able to best demonstrate the impact that you have on your projects. And I feel that the most effective way of doing that is by treating your portfolio as a collection of case studies. And we will go into that in quite a bit of detail as well. And then lastly, there's your overall web presence. This includes your website and blog, if you have one. It includes your social media, anything that is findable about you online speaks to your credibility, that you can do what you say you can do, and your relevance, that you are aware of the marketplace, that you are active in the marketplace, and that you bring value to your prospective employers. And so we'll be going into that in depth as well. As we continue forward, please know that at any time you can use the Q&A functionality to ask a question. I will be monitoring those periodically, and I will ensure that I answer the questions at the appropriate time in our webinar today. If there is a question that I feel isn't entirely relevant to today's topic, I will make a note of it and I will contact you separately to ensure that your question gets answered. So we'll dig into the resume first. As we go through today's webinar, I want you to be asking yourself these questions because this is really a matter of self-reflection. The more we can understand where we're coming from, the better we can present ourselves to others. So when we start with the resume, which I describe as this timeline of your evolution, it's really critical that we aren't only using it to capture exactly what has happened, but that we're positioning it so that we are demonstrating to our ideal prospective employers how we can serve them. So the first things first, just like on any design project, we have to understand who we are trying to serve. So what are the needs of your next company or team? If they're looking to hire, that tells you that they have a gap in their resources. They have a gap in their talent, and they have a need for someone of a particular skill set and experience level and outlook and approach to solve a part of their business's problems. So what are they needing? You have to first know that, and that's where it all begins. Once you are able to build empathy for your prospective employer, and I mean down to the person who is responsible for the hiring, not just the company as a whole, but who you'll be interviewing with, who will be reviewing your materials, who makes the ultimate hiring decision. When you have greater clarity on their needs, you can then begin to ask yourself, how am I the best solution to meet those needs? Through understanding how you can bring your skills and your process and your experience to bear to serve their business, you can position your resume to very clearly articulate how you are the solution to their needs. Ultimately, it is our responsibility to not only demonstrate how we are a fit, but also to differentiate ourselves from everyone else who's interested in that position. There's always going to be a lot of competition for the best jobs. And so the things that make you unique, what your educational background is, what your experience is, what your skills are, those will allow you to set yourself apart when you demonstrate how you can use the whole entirety of your experience to benefit their business. It doesn't mean that you need to be like everybody else. In fact, being different makes you more memorable and it makes you more appealing, so long as you're able to express how those differences benefit them. Any questions on resume before we move on? And I'm taking questions in the Q&A section of Google Hangout. And I'll check chat as well to see if anything's going on there. Nope, Q&A. Any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to move on now to our next topic, which is a portfolio. Now, there are a lot of courses out there, a lot of blog posts out there, a lot of attention around how to craft the best portfolio. I have a very different perspective on this. You will not be seeing any visuals of portfolios that I think are doing it right, because I don't want to encourage you to emulate them. So already I'm seeing questions around the resumes. Do I have examples? I don't want to show you examples because that would imply that the example is worth following. This is ultimately for you to demonstrate your uniqueness, and the portfolio is no exception to that. Instead of a gallery of finished products, a gallery of images, which is what most of our examples of portfolios look like, and what we're told by professors, by whomever, what we think we're supposed to do is create this gallery of pictures that somehow, shows all of this finished work that we've done. That is actually a really ineffective way to communicate your value and the impact that you have on your projects. So what we want to do instead is treat your portfolio as a collection of case studies. A case study is an example of a detailed account of what occurred on that particular project. You really need a fewer number of case studies if you go into greater depth explaining the work that you did, the impact that it had, and how you approach your work. I have these questions that I use when I'm developing my own case studies and that I share with my clients to develop theirs. And over the years, I have found these to be incredibly beneficial questions. The first 5 are standard. For any project you've done, regardless of the role that you played, regardless of how long ago it was, regardless of what you think is the relevance to what you're doing now, these questions will express how you approach your work. What problem was I trying to solve? Is an amazing first question to ask yourself. So consider a project where you know you had an impact. You know that the work that you produced changed the course of the project, that you brought your skills and your talents to bear. Regardless of whether you started the project with an awareness of what problem you were trying to solve, in retrospect, if you ask yourself that question, there will always be an answer. Were you trying to improve the conversion rate for a particular product? Were you trying to help a particular target audience be more efficient in a particular task? What was the problem that your target audience was facing, that the business was facing, that necessitated this project? This question is relevant whether it was an external client-facing project, commercial product, consumer product, enterprise, internal project. It applies. What problem was I trying to solve? Next, who was the problem affecting? This means who was the target audience? Who was ultimately going to be the intended user or customers of the thing that you were producing? That helps to provide context. It helps to provide a greater awareness of what the value of this work was. Next question, what steps did I take to solve it? One of the most common questions in an interview process that stumps people all the time, and it has stumped me many times before I came to really understand what it meant, is what is your process? When I was first asked, what is your process? I was completely unaware that I even had a process or really what a process was. But when you ask yourself, what steps did I take to solve this problem? Every activity that you engaged in, every method that you used, every deliverable that you produced, every iteration, that is a step that you took to get closer and closer to the solution. And it is really those steps, even if you're figuring them out retroactively, that really express what your approach is to your work, how you think, how you grapple with problems that you have, how you bring your skills forward, what tools you use, what methods you use. It gives a tremendous amount of visibility into what it is you're doing. Very different than just showing a screenshot of the finished website, where you may have played a role, but you were not necessarily responsible for it in its entirety. And that screenshot alone does not express how you make an impact. What was the final solution provides you with an opportunity to actually show that finished product. Only once you've expressed the context and the value and the impact and the approach does the final solution have any relevance to your prospective employer, because you are not going to produce something that is identical to that finished product for them. And if they're asking that of you, they're probably not such a great prospective employer. If instead they are looking to see how a similar project or a project for a similar target audience or with a similar problem, you ultimately approached it, you can show that final solution, but it's a supporting image rather than the main show. How did things change as a result is your opportunity to express how you moved the needle in the business, how the success metrics were impacted, how conversions were impacted, how your target audience's lives and work were impacted. Ultimately, how did things change? Now, oftentimes we don't get a lot of insight into this. And this is one of the questions that most of my clients struggle with, because if you're working for an agency or you're a freelancer, you may have moved on and not really been a part of the conversations that actually would allow you to have insight into how things changed for the business, how things changed for the users or the customers as a result of your work. If you have any contacts who might have insight into this, whether they were the product owner, whether they have access to any kind of logs or analytics, I encourage you to reach out to make the attempt to get at this information. But in the case where it is not available, in the case where there's just no way for you to really figure out through any channel how things change as a result, I would recommend this alternate sixth question. And this sixth question, my clients have found they enjoy answering it and sharing these responses on all their projects. But this last question, what would I do differently? Knowing what I know now, that is a very powerful question to answer in your case study, even if you don't know exactly what the impact was or what the business change or the customer change was that occurred as a result of the work. You have grown as a practitioner, you have new experience and new insight, and undoubtedly there are things that you would do differently in retrospect. Showing that just as much as showing what changed as a result of the work demonstrates growth, and it demonstrates awareness of your value and of your evolution. And that is ultimately what you are trying to convey in your portfolio. Now I'm seeing a whole bunch of questions that have popped up here, and they are being voted on in real time. So I'm going to go to the ones with the most upvotes, and I will select them as I can go through them and answer them one at a time. And I hope that this works. So selecting question. Here we see that Jonathan Franken has asked, how do you show case studies if you've signed an NDA? Now, this is a very common question, and we are not implying here that every portfolio needs to be publicly accessible. It may be that a case study, which is for a project that was under NDA, needs to either be password protected, or it needs to be something that you only show to your prospective employers in real time, when you have control of the display and you can talk it over, and there's no leave behind for that prospective employer. So in those cases, I've found that you are really not in any way breaking that confidentiality, because you are ensuring that all of those materials stay in your possession. And if you follow this approach of reflecting on these questions, you're ultimately talking about yourself and your approach much more than you are about the product itself. If you feel, even with all of the materials only in your possession, that you would somehow be violating the NDA, if perhaps it was a really stringent NDA, then you can change the name. You can remove the name entirely. You don't have to say who it was for. You can just be vague and say what industry it was, or describe the project more loosely. Or you can take out the final screenshots. But your process is yours, and that is not something that you would be in breach of an NDA to share. I hope that answers your question. We have another question here. Mirna has asked, can this be a double-edged sword? Like having too much text on case studies and having the risk of people not reading? Great question. What I would recommend is that you answer each of these questions in 2 to 3 sentences max. You really don't need more than that to properly, clearly express your answers. In 2 or 3 sentences, you can then provide supporting images that illustrate what you shared in that small bit of text. You can use that as a lead-in to the image. You can use it as a caption to the image. But what you're doing is you're now shifting from a gallery of images to a story that you're telling, where those images are being used to support the story, not being the focal point of the story, where you're forcing your prospective employers to make their own interpretations. I would agree that these should not be answered in a page apiece unless there's a really good reason for it. I have found that 2 to 3 sentences is a good amount to have the story told effectively. And then if you have the opportunity to present your portfolio to a prospective employer, you can add your own voice over and go into greater depth based on the conversation, based on the understanding that you have of their needs and their interests, what they're most attracted to. You then can go into greater depth. What is on the page with your images is really just meant to be context setting and enough to really drive home the impact that you yourself had on this project. I hope that that answers your question. So Denise McDermott is asking, how can you say how effective the work was if you don't have access to the data, et cetera, post-launch? So I touched on this a little bit, but I will state again that if you absolutely have no access and you have no contacts who have access and you don't have any before and after screenshots or knowledge, and there's really absolutely no way for you to have any awareness to what changed as a result of your work. And I'm going to say it's extremely rare that that's the case. I have hardly ever found that to be true. It's always a great excuse to reach out to a previous colleague. You never know what new work it might drum up. But if in fact you have absolutely no access, then instead of answering that question, how did things change as a result, then I would recommend that alternate of what would I do differently, knowing what I know now. That's a question you can always answer. I hope that answered your question, Denise. All right, next question. Jonathan asks, are case studies of websites enough to show, or should we create mock app projects to show variety? Again, this all ties back to understanding who your ideal target audience is, your ideal prospective employer, and understanding their needs. How are you a solution to their needs? If you have one case study that clearly demonstrates your value and your impact on a project, and that is the value they need, then one case study will do the job. Variety for variety's sake is unnecessary. Variety is beneficial when you have a variety of needs for your target audiences or different target audiences with different needs. So you need to ask yourself, what is going to be most attractive and most effective for my ideal prospective employers? If you can express your value and your impact and how you are the solution to their needs in 3 case studies, then that's great. If you can do it in 1, fabulous. If you feel as if there's additional skills and talents that you have that haven't been fully brought to bear in your project work, then having your own side project where you can clearly express that is very valuable. But make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. And the right reasons are because it better meets your ideal prospective employer's needs. Hope that answers your question. Okay, lots of questions on portfolio. I love it. So Ada, I hope that's how you pronounce your name, asks, if a case study includes rigorous user testing, how much of that process should be condensed? What's a good length to show in a portfolio? As I mentioned before, I think that you can really express yourself clearly in around 2 to 3 sentences. If there was a particular insight or a few insights that came out of usability testing that greatly impacted the direction of the project, or that ultimately changed the end solution for the better, then highlight those. There's no need to go into every single thing that you did in your user research or your usability testing. Enough to demonstrate your approach and your value and the impact that your approach has on the final solution. Beyond that, it's really up to you to voice it over as appropriate when you are walking through your portfolio live with a prospective employer in an interview type setting. If there's a need where they're going to be providing a lot of usability testing as a part of your potential role there, then that's something you're going to want to focus on. But it doesn't need to be fully written out in the static portfolio page. Thank you. All right, I'm looking through these questions and there's a lot of them. So we've got another question here from David. Have successful case studies included interviews with end users? If user research and user interviews are part of your process and the result of that work changed the ultimate solution because you gained new insights, because you had greater awareness of their needs, because you were able to help your employer, your business, better understand how to best serve the target audience, then yes, you absolutely should be including that. And I would include that as part of what steps did I take to solve it. User interviews are one of the steps, and this was the result, these insights that led to new awareness and therefore new conclusions. Thank you for the question. All right. I am going to move on just in the interest of time, but I am aware that there's more questions here. I will be sure to get to more of them as we have time as the webinar continues. So moving on from portfolio, we now are going to start talking about web presence. This includes both your website and your blog, as well as your social media presence. And I see that we already have some questions from viewers on social media and web presence. So that's great, and I'll be sure to get to those. Your website and your blog is your sandbox. It is your space to play and to build and to express yourself. And when you have an understanding of your target audiences, you know who your ideal prospective employers are. You know what they need. You know how your skills and your experience and your process and your perspective and your personality are of value to them, and you can be a solution to their needs. It is ultimately on your website and your blog that you can best express that creatively. So ask yourself, what story do I have to share about my purpose? Your purpose is the solution to your audience's problems. So if you have a prospective employer who is struggling with a lot of customer complaints, and they can't quite seem to get certain features right, and they know that they don't have enough awareness of how to better understand their customers, and so they're going to bring you in, they're going to bring in a user experience practitioner, or they're going to bring in a customer insights person, or they're going to bring in a user researcher, whatever the role is. Or they're going to bring in a general web designer, but they need that person to have user research skills and experience and awareness and process. Your purpose can be expressed as how you bring the customer's needs to the forefront of the design process. I express my purpose as putting humanity back into business. Lately, I've been talking about my purpose as using empathy to get results. That purpose that I had meets the needs of my target audience. And on my website, through the way that I present myself, my bio, my blog, my contact information, all of it is an expression of that purpose and how I tell my story so that I attract my target audience to me. So these are the questions you really need to be asking yourself in how you want to express yourself in your sandbox. Now, there's also the value of going out of that sandbox to ensure that you're bringing people to you in whatever sandboxes they are playing in. And that is ultimately through social media. Whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Dribbble, any kind of portfolio site, any kind of community site, any kind of forum, anywhere where people are gathering in community. You need to consider how you are presenting yourself and whether it is in fact in line with who you want to position yourself as the solution to your ideal prospective employer's needs. 3 things that you really need to consider when it comes to your social media profiles. Firstly, does your bio make you findable? What that means is that if someone were to search for a visual designer, and you're a visual designer, is your bio going to come up? Is your profile going to come up? I have certain keywords in my social media profiles that I want to be findable for. When someone's searching for empathy, I want them to find me. When someone is searching for nonviolent communication, I want them to find me. In the past, I wanted them to find me when they were searching for user experience. And so words were always in my bios. Ensure that whatever the length of the bio, whatever the format of the social media platforms you're using, you are findable. That includes having your full name, that includes having contact information, and making it clear that this profile belongs to you, the person who is in fact, applying for the job, trying to get the gig. Do the posts that you are publishing to those platforms, do they reflect your intentions? Meaning, if you are trying for a project management position, are you sharing things on social media that are relevant to project management? Or is everything about a topic that has nothing to do with project management? That's not to say that every single thing you post has to be about what you're trying to be hired for. Absolutely, variety on social media. It shows your personality. It shows the multiple facets that make you you, and that's always a positive thing. But if you are actively seeking a project management position or a visual design position or a user experience position or a marketing position, and you are not posting anything that's relevant to that position, what is the prospective employer going to think when they come to your profile? It's not going to click for them. So demonstrate that you are relevant and that you're active through your social media posts. And then lastly, how will I appeal to my ideal next employer or client? If you're going after a startup and you have a photo of yourself in a suit and tie on your social media profiles, how is that going to appeal? Are they going to think it's a cultural mismatch? The opposite is also true. If you're going after positions in large corporations and you have a photo of yourself on your social media profile holding a beer, how is that going to appear to the prospective employers that you are most interested in? You need to ensure that it's a match. Everything that you post, everything that you share in your bio, and your photo, the way that you present yourself in all of these different venues needs to be aligned with what you're ultimately trying to attract to you. So be conscious of that. I know I have a few questions here on social media, so I'm going to go through these and ensure that I get to them. So here we have a question from Lorraine. How do people who value their privacy and their time create and maintain an acceptable, if minimal, social media presence? How do those of us who are mainly lurkers in social media still get considered for hiring? Great question, Lorraine. So if you are one of those folks who really values your privacy and isn't interested in sharing where you are and what you're reading and who you're with and things of that nature, do not fret. Social media is still very relevant and doable for you. As I was describing, if you are going after a certain type of company, consider what they're reading. Consider what their influencers are. Consider what information, what news, what trends they're most interested in. There are so many websites, I can't even begin to name them all, that allow you to find content that is relevant to what you're most interested in and what your prospective employers are most interested in. So even if it's a few articles a week that you're posting, it could be one a day, it could be 3 a week, where you're sharing something that you read that's relevant to the work you want to be doing, that's relevant to the work of your ideal prospective employers, and you just share one small opinion on that thing that you read. Wow, it's so interesting that this is coming to the surface. Or I just read this research study that shows X, Y, and Z. Totally not what I expected. Short and sweet, but still something that you can share that is of relevance to the work you want to be doing and who you want to be doing it with. That is a very effective way to be using social media. Imagine yourself in the position of your prospective employer. If they were to go to your social media profiles, what would they find? And would they feel that this was someone that they were interested in working with? If you have no social media presence, no posts, if you are set as private and therefore can't be seen by someone who comes to your page, if you haven't shared something in the last 3 years, what does that tell someone about your relevance, about your involvement, your engagement, your ambition? I don't think it speaks to the world that we're living in today. So I'm not suggesting that you have to be an overshare, and I'm not suggesting that you have to put things that make you uncomfortable, but you most certainly can use the platforms to your benefit to give greater insight into what you're thinking about and what your perspective is, and help your prospective employers better recognize whether you're a fit for them. Hope that answers your question, Lorraine. Thank you. Okay. Still going through these questions here. All right, I'm seeing more questions about portfolio, so I'm going to go back to those quickly. Becky asked, does it matter how long ago the project was executed or completed? Is it better to include a great example from 2 years ago or a mediocre example from a month ago? I think you probably know the answer to this question, Becky. It doesn't really matter when, as long as it's relevant. The year doesn't matter, but if it's a totally outdated example where the technology that was used to execute it is no longer in favor or is considered outdated, that's not going to be a relevant example. But if it was an awesome project where you had an amazing impact and you're so proud of it, and it happened 2 years ago, and the work is super relevant to the work that you want to be doing, and you feel that the skills that you brought to bear on that project are beneficial for your ideal prospective employers, then that's a great example to use, as opposed to something that happened recently that has no relevance whatsoever. So don't worry about how long ago it was. Think about how relevant it is to the work you want to be doing and the needs of your prospective employers. Thank you, Becky. All right, I'm going to keep moving forward and continue to answer your questions as we go. Ooh, you know what? I'm actually going to answer one more question because I just gave a little sneak peek and I realized what's coming next. I am seeing a lot of questions around when you don't have what you don't believe is enough experience. I'm going to save that. Career changers, I'm going to save that. I will definitely answer these questions, but it's going to come at the end of the webinar, so please hang on tight. Question on resume here from Kylie. How should your resume be different than what is on your LinkedIn profile? So I think that there can be a lot of repetition between what you're sharing in your experience on your LinkedIn profile and what you're sharing on your resume. Consistency is definitely good, but your LinkedIn profile is more like what we would call a CV, a curriculum vitae, where it's the entirety of your experience. Your resume can remain brief, like a one page that is specific and relevant and designed for the position you are applying for. You can have a variety of resumes for a variety of different prospective employers. You can have, it designed in a way that really demonstrates your talents and your skills in a way that you can't control on LinkedIn. So perhaps the experience section on your LinkedIn profile will be similar to the experience section on your resume, but overall your resume is going to be much more expressive of who you are, the kind of work you want to be doing now, and telling the story of how you will meet your prospective employer's needs, designed just for them. Hope that answers your question. All right. This just a second ago, but as I mentioned earlier, those of you who put your info on the event page before 2 p.m. Eastern or so today, that's kind of when I cut it off. We had a lot of people. I did a little something. I secret shopped your web presence. I looked at your websites, I looked at your social media profiles, and I came up with a score of how well you're doing based on a variety of criteria that I use, and I will show you how you fared. So for the sake of some kind of privacy, not total privacy, perhaps with some kind of privacy, I have used your initials. There are possible 17 total points based on my criteria of how relevant you are based on your web presence. And so you can find your initials and see your score of where you rank out of 17 points. If you have specific questions about how I did this rating and where you can improve, please feel free to email me. I didn't have enough time in this hour to go into depth on what those criteria are and where you where I didn't check for each person. I didn't think it was a good use of our time to do that. But if you have an interest in your specific score and how to improve, please feel free to email me. I will stay for as long as necessary to answer everyone's questions, but I want to be respectful of your time, and I did say it was a 1-hour webinar. So before we go, I want to reiterate that this that we've gone over today is a part of one of our sessions in Plot Your Course, our group career coaching program. The entirety of the Plot Your Course workbook, which is 32 pages, an interactive PDF that asks these questions and many, many more to help you identify what your target audiences are, who your target audiences are, and what your purpose is, and how you can be ensuring that you're presenting yourself in the best possible light. That workbook is going on sale November 20th. And those of you who are watching this are getting 50% off this week if you pre-order. It's a big discount. Use the offer code HIRED. Go to gum.co/PYC workbook, PYC for Plot Your Course, and you will see that you can pre-order the workbook there. For those of you who are feeling like it would benefit you to get my guidance, the support of a community of like-minded professionals who are working together to design our careers, I encourage you to join our next round of Plot Your Course. It starts in January and registration is open now. You can go ahead to my site, whitneyhess.com/plot, and learn all about Plot Your Course there. I want to thank you so much for your time today. This has been Get Yourself Hired. As promised, I will stay and answer all of these questions. So if your question hasn't been answered yet, or if you see a question that's interesting you, please stick around. But I just wanted to be respectful of everyone's time and finish here at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific on the dot. Thank you so much. All right, for those of you who are going to stick around, I'm going to get into every single one of these questions, and I'm just going to go for them one at a time. So we won't stick to any particular format at this point. I see a lot of upvotes for this one from Dawn. What advice do you have for career changers regarding their resume? For example, I've been a teacher for many years. How much experience should I include that is not directly related to UX or design? So Dawn, first, you need to understand the needs of your prospective employers. Have I drilled that in enough today? Okay, good. If you are able to identify that part of the positions that you're interested in require, let's say, educating people in other departments of the value of user experience and design, then I would say that your experience as a teacher is incredibly relevant. You need to consider all those skills, all the assets that you've developed over the years as a teacher and how that is relevant to the work that you want to do now. You don't necessarily have to, be faithful is the word I'm going to choose to the specifics of that position in the description of the previous position. But if you were a teacher who was educating people on new topics, then you can use that line item on your resume to give prominence to the skills that you use, the talents that you have for educating in a way that is relevant to your ideal position. You don't have to say, and I had 15 people in my class, and it was a public school, and I was in such and such school district, and I had to use such and such standards to teach by. That might not be as relevant if you're going for a UX or design position. But the tools that you use, your approach, your classroom behaviors, your principles with an LE, not an AL, that is very relevant to potentially to the work that you want to do. So consider the entirety of your experience as an asset. It's just how you want to position it, how you want to frame it, so that your prospective employers can very clearly understand, this benefits me. How does your previous experience benefit me as your prospective employer? Express that. Hope that answers your question. So we've got a question from Sarah here. How would you apply this approach if you're new to web design development and don't yet have any or very little professional experience? Well, my first answer is going to be, please come to Plot Your Course. It would be sensational to have you in the program, because we have a lot of participants who are brand new to this field. And what they're trying to figure out is how to get their foot in the door. And you feel like you don't have any experience, and you feel like you don't have the skills that employers are looking for. But if you've been alive on this planet and you've been doing any work up until this point, even as a student, I guarantee that you have begun to hone skills that are relevant to design and development. So I would encourage you to join us. It might be that you go for the workbook and you begin to ask yourself these questions about what your long-term intentions are, your short-term intentions, who you're really trying to target, so that you have a better understanding of the kinds of employers that are going to be a good fit for you, why you're passionate about this, and ultimately what your purpose is. And as you begin to design your career in Plot Your Course, you gain greater clarity and focus of how to position yourself so that any previous experience you have feels relevant to the work you want to do now. So that's my pitch for Plot Your Course. I believe in this program, and I've seen amazing things happen from all kinds of participants, from aspiring practitioners to veterans, just make enormous strides in their career by really taking the time to self-reflect and to being a community of people who are self-reflecting together. And that's what Plot Your Course is. So I hope you'll join us. Thank you, Sarah. So similar question from Erin here. I'll put it up for a second. Do you have any advice for getting hired without much or any UX experience outside of an academic setting? Is it worth it to try for jobs that ask for more experience than you have? So I think I've mostly answered your question, Erin, but I will add the following. Always, always apply for jobs that are asking for more experience than you have. Here's why. We don't really understand the depth of our own experience. So if we were only applying for jobs that we thought we were completely qualified for, quite frankly, we should be doing a job that's above that. That position might report to us if we are that qualified. Our perception of our own qualifications are skewed. We have a negativity bias. Every single person I've worked with, no matter how kind of confident they appear on the outside, they don't believe they are qualified for positions that they show me. And I'm like, you're a shoo-in for this, and this position should be reporting to you. So I strongly encourage you to not stop yourself from applying for positions that really appeal to you. If you know that's the work you want to be doing, apply. But using these techniques that we've been discussing, you will be positioning yourself for how you are of value in that position, how you will impact the business. So it's okay if they're saying 3 to 5 years experience, you don't have 3 to 5 years experience. That's just a number. That's just a ballpark to weed people out. And another thing, because you are female, I will say women, by and large, will not apply for positions unless they believe they are qualified for every single bullet point on that job listing. What do you think it takes for men statistically to apply for those positions? The studies have found 1 or 2 bullet points that they feel they're qualified for. They'll be willing to apply. They are less risk adverse when it comes to presenting themselves to prospective employers. Now, if you identify as male and you are thinking to yourself, that doesn't sound like me at all, of course, these are the research studies that are out there. It doesn't necessarily apply to every individual. But by and large, men are more likely to apply for positions that they are less qualified for than women. So as a woman myself, I like to buck that trend by applying for gigs and putting myself out there for positions that I feel I'm wildly unqualified for. That's the only way we can even the score. And I encourage you to do the same. Thank you, Erin. Joelle is asking if the slides will be available after, and yes, I will be emailing these to you, and this recording will be available on my YouTube channel, so you will see all of this as well. Thank you, Joelle. Becky is asking, assuming you go into a good amount of detail, how many case studies should you include in your portfolio? Again, it is not a hard and fast rule on numbers. You want to show the experience that is relevant to your ideal prospective employers. If you can do that in 1 case study, go for it. That is not common, but that doesn't mean it isn't effective. I cannot tell you how many gigs I personally have gotten when I went into an interview and showed only 1 project, because I showed that project in enough depth that it made clear to that hiring manager, to that prospective employer, that I knew my stuff and that I was capable of doing what they needed. If there are different skills that you've used on different projects and you want to illustrate that in its entirety, then yes, multiple case studies are needed so that you can show different aspects of yourself being put to use in different ways. But if in fact you have 1 big project where you did it all and it's life altering, put everything into that. I have seen people do 3, I've seen people do 6. Once you have greater than 10, there's a likelihood that you're not going to be putting enough detail into each one of your case studies. You're probably just going to have images and no context. You're not going to be clearly expressing your impact. And therefore, the case study, their portfolio piece, is actually going to probably do more harm than good. So I would focus on relevance, and I would focus on clarity, and on ensuring that you are demonstrating how you are the solution to your prospective employer's needs before you get stuck on a set number of case studies for your portfolio. Hope that answers your question, Becky. Thank you. Mike asked for a resume example, and I said earlier that I don't want to provide one. I will say, in Plot Your Course, when we get to week 9, where we're talking about this stuff in more depth, I do show some examples of resumes and portfolios. I'm not going to do it now because by week 9 of Plot Your Course, I have drilled into your brain how important your uniqueness is. And I have drawn out of you your appreciation for your own uniqueness to such a great extent that by that point in the program, when I show these examples, I know there is very minimal risk of someone taking it and trying to emulate it. That's really the worst thing you could do. Be you. So I'm not going to show you an example, but if you sign up for Plot Your Course, when we get to that point of the program, you will see some examples of clients that have worked with me to develop their resumes and portfolios and web presence. And I will show how those portfolio questions for the case studies, the variety of ways in which that can be expressed. Thanks, Mike. Noreen asked a question. What if your experience is all over the place? Usability on one project, research on the next, infographics on another, cleaning the grid on the next, etc. Then you need multiple case studies. I think that just like the previous question where I believe it was from Becky, where she was asking, like, how many do I need? And I said, if you've done it all on one project will suffice. If you haven't done it all on one project, that's why you need multiple case studies. So I would, if you feel like you have not done multiple activities on any of your case studies, you might even on your landing page where you are providing links to each of your individual case studies, you might even have like a caption or a blurb under each one that highlights the role that you played or the value that you brought on that particular project. Again, this needs to be designed for the needs of your prospective employer. But if you are applying for a position where they are specifically asking for experience with usability testing, user research, and infographics, for instance, which good luck if it's that broad. They want a unicorn. But if in fact that's what they're asking for, then why not on that landing page under each of the case studies say something like usability testing, user research, infographics, so that they know what they're looking at before they go there. That will give them the context that each of those case studies is highlighting a different method or tools or techniques that you bring to the table. I would encourage you to express in greater terms your impact beyond just the method that you used. I believe, because I know you personally, that it's not just that you know how to do usability testing or that you know how to make infographics. That's not your value. Your value is in your strategic approach. It's in the wealth of experience that you bring. It's in your ability to collaborate and communicate with a variety of people. People want to be around you, that you're a great listener, and so you hear things that other people don't. That's what you want to be highlighting in your portfolio. And so if you were to focus too much on the, here's where I did usability testing, here's what I did user research, you might be eclipsing your true value. Just want to give you some food for thought. Thanks, Noreen. Okay, Dora. Thank you for those of you who've stuck with me. It's so exciting. Okay, Dora has a question. How would you present a case study on a project completed under less than ideal circumstances? So, FYI, every project is completed under less than ideal circumstances. Even if you're using that as a euphemism for really shitty circumstances, there is no such thing as ideal. Maybe when you're in school, you are encouraged by your professor to do things the quote right way or the ideal way, where you're given all the latitude in the world and all the time in the world to do the project perfectly. But in the working world outside of school, it's never an ideal circumstance. So don't talk yourself into believing that something went awry on the project, because even if there was conflict and differing opinions and people screaming at each other and the solution wasn't what you had hoped it would be and it wasn't implemented the way it was designed, then welcome to our world. That is every single project. That is the norm. So that's part of the universe that we're operating in. If you are dissatisfied deeply with the end solution, then don't focus on the end solution. You can talk about what you would do differently, knowing what you know now, as kind of takeaways, and not be highlighting what that final product was. If there was no final product, it's a similar circumstance. You don't need to put so much of an emphasis on, you know, what the final thing was, because things rarely are final. You know, maybe it'll be updated again, or maybe it's been updated since you worked on it. Who knows? Focus on you and your impact, what you bring to the project, not so much on the end result. I hope that helps. Okay, I'm seeing maybe one more question that is relevant to what we're discussing here, and then maybe a few others that are about other things, and I'm happy to answer those as well, but I just want to make sure that we stick to the get yourself hired topics first. Joelle asked, does our career story take precedence over the standard resume format? So Joelle, ask yourself if your ideal prospective employers expect the standard resume format. And by standard, I'm assuming like what your parents made or what they, you know, what was established as the perfect one-pager resume in 1980. If you are looking at prospective employers that have that expectation, then I would encourage you to use a standard resume format. But consider whether that's actually the case. Because if you're working with a company that's trying to be more innovative, or that's smaller, or that perhaps is, you know, less concerned with the way things once were and more interested in where things are going, then they're not going to be so stringent. And if they see that your resume doesn't match some kind of supposed standard, they'll be excited by that. That will help you stand out. That will differentiate you, and that will feel more like them. They'll be connected to that. So consider it. If you're going after, you know, I'm struggling to even think of someone, but it's like the difference between, you know, every company that I wanted to say JP Morgan Chase, I wanted to say IBM, but the truth is those companies are pushing the boundaries as well. They don't want to be considered the corporate behemoths. They want to be considered innovative as well. I know people who work in design at JP Morgan. I know people who work in design and related positions in IBM, and they don't follow the standard resume format. So I can't even bring to mind a single prospective employer you might have where I would say, yes, you have to follow the supposed standard. I think the standard's gone. That's my conclusion. Thank you, Joelle. Okay. So I am seeing only questions that are tangential, which are great. I'm going to still answer them, but I just want to make everyone who's still listening aware that we're going to move on to somewhat related topics, but not specifically about getting yourself hired. So this might be the time to jump off, unless you see a question in this list that you're really interested in the answer for. So thank you for those of you who stayed the extra 22 minutes and who are leaving now. I appreciate your time, and I'll keep going. I'm not going anywhere until these are all answered. All right, gonna just take them one at a time. David is giving me praise. Thank you, David. I so appreciate that. Yes, it's a very scary prospect when no one's saying anything. And you may have noticed I was kind of stumbling in the beginning because I wasn't seeing any viewers, and for some reason there was like a delay in showing the viewers, and that scared the hell out of me because all these people RSVP'd, and then suddenly all the people appeared, and I was like, okay, I feel better now. So thank you, David. Adriana is asking, after we have mastered our portfolio, how can we prepare for the interview? What's your advice or tips? Well, Adriana, I have a lot to share on that subject, but it really is specific for the person. It's specific for who you're targeting, what kind of work you want to be doing, and instead of answering that question here and being general and therefore kind of irrelevant, I would encourage you to sign up for one of my Pay What You Wish sessions. If you go to my website, whitneyhess.com, you'll see Pay What You Wish in the nav, and you can, if you have an interview that you're preparing for right now, or you're planning to be applying for jobs and you want guidance on preparing for an interview, we can have a single session and you can share your story and we can dig in and I can give you as much guidance as is possible in a 20 or 50-minute session. You pick. So I hope that is a satisfying enough answer for now. Pay What You Wish is available to everyone for a single session. If, of course, you are looking for longer term guidance, I have 6 to 12 month coaching engagements that I do one-on-one, and group coaching programs like Plot Your Course. So if you need help figuring out what the right thing is for you because you are looking for guidance and you're not quite sure what kind of guidance you need, as always, feel free to email me and we'll figure it out together. Thank you, Adriana. Ramakrishnan has asked, how do I get my portfolio reviewed? And similar answer to you, you can sign up for a Pay What You Wish session, and I can walk through your portfolio with you in real time and give you feedback. But I would encourage you to first take a look at those portfolio questions that I shared and see if you have constructed your portfolio pieces like case studies and put some effort into that prior to the review, because otherwise I don't know that it'll be a great benefit to you. I would much prefer, and I think it would be more benefit to you as well, to give you feedback on something once you've grappled with these questions. So as always, feel free to reach out via email or sign up for a Pay What You Wish session, and we can work on it together. Thank you so much. Okay, I have this question from Corey, and I've been looking at it for a while because I'm not really sure what it's asking and how to answer it. I was wondering, how do you equate your UX experience in years for jobs that part UX and part development? I don't think I fully understand your question, Corey, and that's kind of why I've been avoiding it. So if you can, please submit, if you're here, submit your question again and perhaps provide a little bit more detail so that I can answer it satisfactorily. Thank you, Corey. One more question here from Ramakrishnan. How important is knowledge of statistics for doing user research? Now, this is more of a general UX question, and I'm happy to answer it because we're here. User research has two primary streams to it: qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative is in understanding people's behaviors, motivations, attitudes, frustrations, savviness, etc. And it's often the why behind it. The quantitative is what people are doing, what they're doing on your site today, what they're doing in large numbers when you're looking at actual usage behavior, different than behavior as described for qualitative, which is more about their workflow, the behavior that they have in their lives and in their work. The usage behavior that you're looking at in quantitative research is about how they're acting on the web property, on the app, whatever it is that you're working on. If your work involves user research and you have the buy-in and the capacity to do quantitative user research, what that enables is for you to get information from a much broader sample size. So qualitative research is much deeper because you are interacting with an individual and you're able to ask them questions and go into depth. So qualitative is deep. There's a lot of empathy building, a lot of understanding why behind their behaviors and behind their needs. The quantitative is where the statistics come in. So whether you're conducting surveys, whether you are looking at web analytics or logs, you are looking at a broad set of information. And if you have a large enough population that you're doing that research with, you may want to look at statistical significance for your findings. I will say, though, that generally speaking, statistical significance is not a requirement. There are going to be some employers and on some projects where it's really critical, but in 12 years that I've been doing this and hundreds of client projects that I've worked on, I've only once had to show statistical significance for survey results that a survey that I was conducting. So I think that understanding of statistics is important. I do not think that it's necessary to be able to do in great depth. And if the need arises on a particular project, you may bring in someone who has that as an area of specialization to support your work. So vague, general answer for a general question, but I hope that helped. Thank you so much. We've got one more question here from Lindsay. How important are cover letters? Should they remain the standard format? Well, if you heard what I was saying before about the standard format, then perhaps you need to consider what standard really means. So if your prospective employer is going to be a large corporation where they're looking at thousands of candidates and they have specified on the job posting the detailed requirements for your application because they need consistency in order to more efficiently review candidates, then I would, yes, recommend that you design all of your materials to meet those specifications. But that's a rare case. In most cases, you're either sharing, through a resume submission process online, or you're submitting a resume and link to your portfolio through email. And in that case, a cover letter really needs to be personal, and it needs to be relevant, and it needs to succinctly express your understanding of your prospective employer's needs and how you are a solution to those needs. Everything that we've been describing. So short and sweet, to the point, relevant, and personal. I don't believe that there's any standard that you need to follow, a set number of paragraphs, a set number of anything that you need to follow, unless, of course, that is the need and the expectation of your prospective employer. That's ultimately for you to determine. Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, Antoni, I see that you just asked another question, but I think that that's probably something for a longer conversation and probably not as relevant for the people who we still have listening in. So please do shoot me an email or book a Pay What You Wish session, and we can talk in depth about how to position yourself for an industry that doesn't seem to be looking for someone with your skill set. I guarantee you it's possible, but it's really something that's probably relevant only for you, so I'm hesitant to talk about it in the large group. All right, everyone. That has been an hour and a half. You're probably sick of me. Thank you so much for staying that extra half hour. I'm really grateful. This has been Get Yourself Hired, workshops and webinars to make yourself irresistible. I look forward to our next event. If you are on the mailing list for this one, you will get notified of that as well. And remember, if you are looking for greater guidance and you're looking for a supportive community of like-minded practitioners who are designing our careers together, consider Plot Your Course. We start in January of next year, just a couple months away, and registration is open now. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.